All right, so today what we have here is I'm going to be giving my final thoughts on 6 fragrances that I have in my collection. These are all inspired by fragrances. Most of these I've already kind of mentioned on the channel so far. I think maybe about 1 or 2 of them I haven't. So we'll be going over those and just kind of giving my thoughts as far as like how close they come to the original, whether or not, I actually, would recommend these fragrances. And then obviously stuff like the performance and stuff like that. So I'm going to start off with a Banadier fragrance. So this one is number 39 from Banadier. 39 is Banadier's take on YSL's Tuxedo. I've had obviously a lot of different, tuxedo interpretations that I've kind of gone over on the channel. Before this one, the one that I would say that I recommended is definitely the Igua from French Avenue. And I still do recommend this one for sure. This is definitely, it's still very close to Tuxedo as well as the Banadier. So I would say really you can't go wrong with either one of these, but there are kind of like some slight differences between the two. Now, for the Banadier version, what I get with this is the Banadier number 39, when I first initially spray it on, and if I smell it side by side with Tuxedo or even the Igua, what I get from this is it smells like you're skipping over like the first maybe 5 to 10 minutes of Tuxedo. So like that mandarin orange sort of sweetness that you get from the initial opening of Tuxedo, you don't necessarily get that right off the bat from this fragrance. So this kind of smells more sort of woodier for sure, I would say, and maybe a little bit more kind of spicier. And it also, again, it doesn't have as much sweetness up top as, what Tuxedo does, at least to my nose. Tuxedo or the Igua. I would say the Igua, as far as the opening goes, the Igua to me definitely is a little closer for sure than what the Banadier number 39 is. But where I would say the Banadier shines is, again, after maybe about that 5 to 10 minute mark or so. It's a similar sort of experience that I've gotten with a lot of other Banadier fragrances where for maybe the first normally 5 minutes or so or 5 to 10 minutes, the fragrance does smell a little different. And then like after that point, it becomes like almost identical or like a 1-to-1 pretty much to the original. And that's basically what I'm getting from this. So after that 10-minute mark, when I smell this side by side with Tuxedo, this does smell like a 1-to-1, basically. Like I don't think I really picked up on any sort of differences at all after like that 10-minute mark or so. Whereas I didn't initially pick this up, when I initially kind of compared Igua to Tuxedo, but now that I've kind of smelled all 3 together, what I will say is Igua, after, like that 10-minute mark or so, this does seem to be just ever so slightly a little bit more sweeter than Tuxedo and Banadier 39. It's not like, I would say it's definitely not that noticeable unless you actually are smelling the two side by side. So, I think even someone who, is used to wearing Tuxedo, I don't necessarily think that they would be able to tell the difference unless, again, they actually had both of them on and they were going back and forth. So it's not really super noticeable, but I would say that the Igua is maybe about 5% more sweeter overall than what Tuxedo and Banadier number 39 is. As far as Banadier number 39, this to me still has like the same level of sweetness, and it still has like that same level of complexity and quality that you get with, the original Tuxedo. Now, again, I would say for the first 5 to 10 minutes or so, it's not necessarily going to smell that way. It kind of smells like, again, it skips over, that fruity, spicy sort of opening that you get with Tuxedo. So, if the opening, I guess, is like the main thing that you care about with Tuxedo, then maybe just go with Igwa. But if overall, if the whole rest of the fragrance is something that you really, really enjoy, then I do think that Banadier number 39 is going to be the closer choice for you. Um, this also is better projecting for sure than what the Tuxedo is. Really, I would say both of these overall project better than what Tuxedo does. After probably 20 minutes or so, Tuxedo, at least on my skin anyway, like it's not a weak fragrance, but it definitely starts to die down a little bit. And this definitely doesn't. Neither does the Igwa either. But yeah, man, I would say, again, in terms of the smell, the, sort of spicy, woody, bourbon, vanilla, patchouli sort of smell that you get from YSL Tuxedo, that to me, after, about the first 10 minutes, is actually done more accurately in the Bandier number 39. It's just slightly than what it is in the Igwa. So I would say, I mean, if you already have Igwa, to me, it doesn't make sense to go out and get the Bandier until you've actually finished this. Because, I mean, it's not really that much of like an upgrade or a difference. But, if you're someone who, let's say maybe you have something like Maison Alhambra's The Tux, or, you have something like, anything that I would say that's not as close, in my opinion anyway, to Tuxedo, then I would say, you would definitely want to maybe consider Bandier number 39. Or if you don't have any sort of Tuxedo interpretation at all, and you're looking for, the closest and best price, interpretation of Tuxedo, then I would say absolutely the Bandier number 39 is definitely going to be, your best choice for sure. Now, performance-wise, like I mentioned, this does definitely project louder than Tuxedo, but I would say projection-wise, it's pretty much on par with Igwa. So, you're going to get at least about an arm's length or so for about the first hour and a half, 2 hours. And then longevity-wise, at least for me, it lasts well over 10 hours. So really, really good performance with this. And in terms of just a closeness rating on this. This, I would say overall is probably like around like 97 to 98% close. The only reason why I can't really say that this is like an exact 1-to-1 is the opening on this, is not as close as what the Igwa is, So that's pretty much what I would say on that. But, again, after that first 10 minutes or so, it's pretty much identical to Tuxedo. And then overall rating on this, I would give this, easily a 9.5 out of 10. I really love the Tuxedo scent profile. So, again, I mean, for this to be the price that it goes for you to get the level of quality that you get in performance, I would say this is definitely a really good choice. And definitely, again, one of Banadier's better interpretations that they have. So definitely would recommend number 39 from Banadier. And the next one we're going to go over here is Arabiat Prestige's Al Noor. So this, again, is their take on, BDK's Gris Charnel Extrait. Now, initially when I, got this particular fragrance, I wore it a couple of times, and it smelled way better, in my opinion, than the Masad from Al Wataniya. So I will still definitely say for sure that the Al Noor is definitely going to be better than the Masad. Initially, what I kind of thought was I thought this came off as a little bit more stronger than what the Gris Charnel Extrait did, and then I was able to finally find my sample of Gris Charnel Extrait, and what I'll say is I think I do still kind of prefer the original Gris Charnel Extrait over this. This is still a very solid interpretation, and I'll just say off the bat, if you're somebody who doesn't, have the ability to spend between like 160 to 200 plus dollars on like the original Gris Charnel X-Straight, then I think that you'll be really happy with this interpretation. This to me, even though the cardamom is definitely way stronger and punchier than what it is in Masai, when I compared it to the original Gris Charnel X-Straight, the cardamom in that was just still, it was even punchier and stronger than what it was in Al Noor. And then to me, it kind of smelled more it smelled a little bit more higher quality and sharper to me in the Gris Charnel X-Straight. Whereas in this fragrance overall, to me, when I compare it to the Gris Charnel X-Straight, it smells like it's kind of slightly more on sort of like the, I guess you could kind of say slightly more on like the smoky side, which makes it slightly more kind of like lighter and I guess more kind of aromatic. Whereas the Gris Charnel X-Straight, to me, the notes in that smell a little bit more kind of concentrated and more dense. Like the Gris Charnel X-Straight, that does smell like an X-Straight de Parfum fragrance, whereas this, to me, it does kind of come across more of what it actually is, which is an Eau de Parfum. So, I think maybe if BD or maybe if Herbiat Prestige would have made this like an X-Straight concentration, maybe it would have had, like that extra bite that the original Gris Charnel has. But yeah, I mean, to me, what I got from this was that really sort of in your face cardamom that you get in the like initial opening of Gris Charnel X-Straight. That it seemed to be, a little bit more punchier in the original than, what it was in this. Now, as you get into the dry down, I feel like that same theme kind of continues. Just overall, I think Gris Charnel it smells a little bit more richer and denser than what the Al Noor does. This still is a very kind of strong fragrance for sure, but it doesn't come across as sort of dense and concentrated as what, the original Gris Charnel X-Straight does. And I mean, basically, Gris Charnel X-Straight, like if you're not familiar with how that fragrance smells, if you smell the original Gris Charnel, it's basically like I would say more of like a masculine sort of more rugged take on that scent profile. So, again, the cardamom is definitely dialed up in this particular fragrance. I feel like the Gris Charnel X-Straight, scent profile, it's not as sweet as what the original Gris Charnel is. So, the sweetness is turned down. I would say the spiciness is kind of turned up from the cardamom. The black tea also seems to be a little bit more kind of prominent in the X-Straight than what it is, at least in my opinion, in the original Gris Charnel EDP. And then, you do get a nice sort of like vanillic dry down, but it doesn't smell like overly sweet at all. So yeah, man, I mean, definitely it's a very good scent profile. I almost actually bought it today. I went ahead and just got Roja's Manhattan instead because I wanted to kind of try something different. But I do think eventually I will get like a full bottle of Gris Charnel X-Straight because it is a scent profile that I've kind of grown to actually like a lot over the years. When I first smelled it, I wasn't that crazy about it. I definitely more so kind of preferred the original Gris Charnel EDP, but I'm now starting to like it a little bit more for sure. So yeah, man, I would say Al Noor is still a very solid interpretation, especially for the price. I believe I picked this one up for like around $40 to $45 or so for this 100 ml. So, again, this is going to be for the person that just doesn't see themselves spending, $150+ on a fragrance. I do think that this is a very, very nice alternative for you. It's just not going to be exactly the same, in my opinion. And it doesn't come across to me anyway as being like the stronger fragrance necessarily. It just comes across as a little bit more kind of smokier and more sort of, I guess you could say more kind of aromatic is what I get from this. But yeah, man, it's still a very solid fragrance. I would say in terms of the performance on this, it still does perform pretty decently. It just to me doesn't necessarily project as loudly as what the Gris Charnel X-Ray does, the original from BDK. So, I would say you're still gonna get like around an arm's length or so of projection for like the first hour and a half. But I definitely seem to get a little bit more from the original Gris Charnel X-Ray. And then I would say performance wise, you're looking at like around 7 to 8 hours or so of total longevity. So still not bad at all. And then as far as my closeness rating goes on this, I would say Al Noor is probably like around, I would say 80 to 85% Gris Charnel X-Ray. So, definitely a very solid interpretation for sure. Just not like a 1-to-1 is what I would say. And then as far as my overall rating goes on this I would still give like a solid 8 out of 10. So this is a very nice kind of masculine, spicy, vanillic sort of tea and fig fragrance is what you get from this. And like I said, it does to me come across a little bit kind of like on the smokier side than what the original does. But it's a very, very nice scent. One I would definitely recommend, especially in this price range for sure. All right, so this one was again Al Noor from Herbiat Prestige. Next one on the list, this one is going to be Lattafa's Dynasty. So what I get from Dynasty is I do definitely get sort of like a twist on Clive Christian's El Red Tea Vetiver. So not like exactly the same necessarily as that fragrance. Like there are definitely like some noticeable differences all kind of throughout the fragrance. But overall, I would say that this is absolutely still like an inspired fragrance of El Red Tea Vetiver. And one that I would actually say that I definitely prefer this over the Clive Christian for sure. When you first spray on the Clive Christian, one thing that I do actually like a little bit better about the Clive Christian is I do like how spicy it comes across the El Red Tea Vetiver. It's kind of like you've just kind of poured a really kind of like spicy sort of red tea when you first spray this on. And I mean, it still comes across, kind of like fruity, I guess you could say. Fruity, spicy. And it kind of has like that sort of calming sort of tea smell to it. But what I don't like about this Clive Christian is to me, the way that it kind of transitions out of like that sort of spicy sort of tea smell that you get in the initial opening, it kind of just transitions into like this sort of musky, sort of like, I would say almost kind of like a wet, musky sort of vetiver type of smell. Yeah, I guess could I say that it smells maybe more sort of like realistic smelling in the Clive Christian? Yeah. And would I say that the Lattafa maybe smells a little bit more kind of like artificial? Yeah, I would say that, but I think this smells more kind of artificial, like in a good way. So the Lattafa to me overall just comes across as like the more like sweeter fragrance. And I think that's part of what makes this one a little bit more wearable to me. So yeah, I mean, when you spray this on, the Latafa does not come across nearly as spicy as what the El Red Tea Vetiver does in the initial opening. And I feel like really the opening is where you get the most sort of difference between these two fragrances. So this, it still opens up with sort of like this slightly kind of fruity tea, like smell. But I would say there's a lot more vetiver in the opening of this fragrance than what it is in the Clive Christian. And the vetiver, really the entire time that you're smelling this fragrance, I would say that the vetiver that you get from the Latafa is definitely more kind of like on the sweetened up side. It doesn't come across as sort of like, it almost kind of comes across smelling like, I would say like a musky sort of sweat is sort of the vibe that I get from the Clive Christian. Whereas this, like I said, it's sweetened up. It doesn't smell as natural, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. Like, I think overall, this just smells more sort of approachable. The Latafa anyway, the Latafa Dynasty. I think the Latafa Dynasty smells a little bit more approachable, a little bit more mass appealing, and not as niche as what the Clive Christian does. Yeah, like, I would say it's more kind of amplified actually on this tester strip, the Clive Christian, than when I got on my skin. There's like this, like I said, it's kind of like a musky sort of like sweaty musk and vetiver type of smell that you get from the El Red Tea Vetiver that I could definitely see, like, maybe depending on the person's skin chemistry or depending on like if they're freshly showered or not, like I could see the Clive Christian actually not smelling too good on some people's skin. Whereas the Latafa, I think the Latafa would have a more sort of like universally accepted smell is, I guess, the best way for me to kind of describe it. And like I said, it would be a little bit more mass appealing. I don't think the Latafa would necessarily smell funny on somebody's skin that wasn't like fresh out the shower. And I mean, again, despite the fact that the Clive Christian, you can definitely tell that, the ingredients that are being used in it are higher quality. It does come across more complex, especially with the way that the spices are done in this fragrance. It just doesn't smell like the better fragrance to me, despite it costing way more than the Latafa does. So yeah, I mean the Latafa is definitely something that I would definitely wear. I would still wear the Clive Christian, but like that would not be a fragrance that I would go and buy like a full bottle of. And I mean I actually really like tea fragrances, so I mean that's saying a lot. And yeah, I mean the Latafa, in my opinion, is not, or I'm sorry, the Clive Christian compared to Latafa is not better than this fragrance, despite this one being like the cheapie. So, I would say if you're into tea fragrances, that really, I would say this is more of I get more of a like a fall and springtime vibe from this particular type of tea scent. I do still think maybe you could probably wear this all year round, especially if you live in a warmer climate like I do. But this, I don't know, for whatever reason, it kind of more so gives me like a fall and spring type of vibe. So this would definitely be something that I would be wearing like around this time of the year for sure. But I still think that you could wear this, in the summertime, especially if you live in a more moderate climate. This is just overall, I would say, one of Latafa's better releases this year for sure. And the hype around this is definitely deserved, in my opinion. It's not like the most complex or groundbreaking scent. It is, to me, a fairly simple smelling scent, but it smells very good. Now, performance is actually way better than the Clive Christian. So the Clive Christian, that gets really, really close to the skin. I would say probably after about an hour or so, like an hour, maybe hour, 15 minutes. Whereas the Dynasty, this is pretty strong, at least about an arm's length or so for like the first hour and a half. And then this does also start to become a lot closer to the skin. But overall, this never becomes weaker than the Clive Christian at any point in time in the fragrance. So this, I would say, is always going to be at least about double the projection of the Clive Christian. And I mean, if we're talking about longevity, this is going to be more of kind of like a 6.5, 7 hours maximum, I would say, longevity type of fragrance. So not necessarily the most beast mode fragrance, but this is just kind of like a fragrance that you throw on casually, I would say, when you're just wanting to kind of chill out, relax. You know, it does sort of have a slightly sort of warm and coziness to it, but it's also sort of fresh and calming and relaxing at the same time. So yeah, man, this is a very, very nice scent. I would say closeness rating to the Clive Christian. This, I would say, is at best maybe about probably 70%, 65 to 70%. So like I said, it's more of like in that twist sort of territory. But I definitely would say that this is absolutely inspired by El Red Tea Vetiver. And then in terms of my overall rating on this fragrance, this I would easily say is like probably a 8.5 out of 10, man. This is a very solid fragrance. Definitely one of the ones that, you know, I intend to keep on this list here. So again, man, definitely check out Lattafa's Dynasty. All right, the next one is Caffe Latte from Kotlish. So this one, like I mentioned in a previous video, Fat Boy Finesse, he's the one who actually put me on to this one. I watched one of his videos, and this turned out to be like a really, really nice scent profile. Like I've said before in previous videos, like coffee scents, just for whatever reason, are not really my favorite thing to wear. But once I got my nose on this, I was like, okay, yeah, this one is pretty nice. Now, I initially got this, bottle here, and I didn't have like the sample of the original. But once I got the sample of the original, what I will say is I actually just went ahead and got a full bottle of the original, the Amore Cafe. So the reason that I did that is when I smelled the sample of the original, to me, the Amore Cafe, it just came across a little bit more richer and bolder than what the Caffe Latte did. So the Amore Cafe, what I got from this was the coffee to me in this was actually a little bit more sort of stronger. And there's almost sort of like this, almost kind of like slightly sort of chocolatey feel that you get from this fragrance that I don't necessarily get as much with the Caffe Latte. And again, those are typically things that I don't necessarily like with coffee fragrances. It's that typical kind of like, you know, dark roast coffee mixed with like dark chocolate. Like that's not typically my thing when it comes to coffee fragrances. But just for whatever reason, this scent profile is really, really nice. I really do enjoy this one a lot. So that was the biggest thing that I got from the Amore Cafe versus like the Caffe Latte was I was getting a little bit more of like a stronger, bolder coffee smell from the Amore Cafe. This overall to me was just a little bit more, like stronger and denser than what the Kotlish Caffe Latte was. And then I would say the last thing was the Caffe Latte to me has a little bit more of sort of like a creamier, sort of more lactonic sort of smell to it. So I guess you could say this one maybe is a little bit more kind of feminine leaning slightly. And it does have, to me anyway, it has a slightly heavier emphasis on almond. which I do still get like an almond sort of smell from the Amore Cafe as well, but it doesn't seem to be as prevalent in the Amore Cafe as what it is in Caffe Latte. And again, this also doesn't seem to be as sort of like creamy smelling as what the Caffe Latte does. So again, I'm not saying that this is a feminine leaning fragrance. I would just say if I'm gonna compare these two, this again has a slightly more kind of creamier feel to it, which makes it, I guess, technically more of a sort of feminine leaning fragrance. But I would still maintain that this is absolutely unisex. I just still prefer the Amore Cafe a little bit more than I did the Caffe Latte. I just think that overall this was a little bit more sort of balanced than what the Caffe Latte was. Again, a little bit more bolder, stronger overall. And it gave me more of sort of like a dark roast sort of chocolatey feel that, I would say the Caffe Latte gives you more sort of like a creamier, sort of nuttier, spiced sort of take on like, that sort of coffee type of smell. Again, typically that would be something, the things that I mentioned about this fragrance would typically be something that I didn't necessarily care for when it came to coffee fragrances. But I don't know, I feel like the way that this fragrance is done, I just prefer it over the cottage. Whether or not that's the case for you, I would say you'll just kind of have to try each one out. You can get the Caffe Latte from Banadier for like $30 for this 100 ml. And then, if you wanted to try and see if you actually prefer Amore Cafe, I would say just pick up a sample somewhere. You could probably get one for like around $10 for like a 2 ml and just kind of smell each one back and forth and see which one you like. But yeah, man, I did like the Mancera a little bit more, and that's why I went ahead and picked this one up. So, if you're just looking for like a really cheap, really cheap, but really nice smelling coffee scent that, again, has a slightly kind of lactonic, creamy sort of feel to it. It does have like a sort of spice latte type of feel along with almond. Then I would definitely say, pick up the Caffe Latte. And if you're looking for something a little bit more bolder, stronger, denser, then I would say, definitely check out the Amore Cafe from Mancera. Now, for the performance on this is still pretty solid. So as far as the projection goes, you're going to get, I would say, easily about an arm's length or so for about the first hour and a half. And then after that, it does dial back a little bit. But, it is still a very good, performing fragrance. So longevity on this is easily over 8 hours for me. So really, really good performance. Like I said, you can get this one from Banadier for like $30. This is a 100 ml bottle. So if you're just looking for something cheap, but, it has like that, sort of creamy sort of almond coffee type of smell, slightly spicy as well, then I would definitely say pick up the Cotlish. In terms of like my sort of closeness rating on this I would still say is at least probably about 85% close to Amore Cafe. All right. So definitely not like a terrible interpretation at all. In terms of like I've had a couple of people ask me about this. They said like, hey, does the Caffe Latte have like a plasticky smell, or, does it smell like plastic? I don't associate what I smell with this fragrance to smell like plastic. No. I think what people may be associating that with is the extra sort of emphasis on the almond that the Caffe Latte has. That's really the only thing that I could even think of that maybe people might be associating to, have this smell like plastic compared to the original Mancera. That's the only thing that I can think of. But yeah, I don't really get like a plastic type of smell from this at all. All right. Now, as for my overall rating on this, I would say overall rating, this is still going to be like probably like an 8 to an 8.5 out of 10. I would just say that the More Cafe from Mancera, for me at least, would be like about a 9. All right. So that one was Caffe Latte. The next one here is Notes Jazz from Fragrance World. So again, this is going to be their take on Silky Woods from Goldfield and Banks. And, you know, like I mentioned before in the previous video, I do think that this is, at least for me anyway, a better version of Silky Woods. And, you know, I think what it is to me, the woods in this is slightly kind of toned down, and I think the vanilla is slightly toned up in this, which, at least for me anyway, it makes it a little bit more wearable, and it doesn't have like this sort of weird underlying smell that, you know, the Goldfield and Banks gave me. I don't know what to associate that smell with other than sort of like I guess kind of like a burning sort of wood smell is really what it comes down to. That is not as prominent in this fragrance. It is still, it is still there a little bit, I would say, in the Notes Jazz. But like I said, the vanilla in this is definitely toned up, you know, a little bit more than what it is in the Goldfield and Banks. And so it kind of sweetens it up a little bit more. It makes it, you know, again, in my opinion, a little bit more wearable. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to keep this fragrance or not, because I mean, I feel like just overall, this scent profile in general, I kind of have to be in the mood to wear it. Again, I do definitely would still say that I would absolutely reach for this before I would, you know, the original. And I mean, I would consider keeping this over, you know, over the original. Like I mentioned, I did have the original bottle, but just kind of sold that after a couple of weeks, you know, of trying to wear that fragrance, because I don't know, I just didn't really enjoy wearing it. This one, I would definitely say I do enjoy wearing a little bit more. To me, it's a little bit more sort of mass appealing than what the original is. It doesn't smell as niche, you know, but at the same time, I would say it does still kind of maintain the same sort of scent profile. So it's not like this is a completely different scent at all. It's just a slightly more sort of tweaked version of, you know, the Silky Woods. So yeah, man, I'll have to see whether or not I'm gonna keep this fragrance or not. It is definitely something that I would only wear basically during this time of the year. So like fall and winter, I guess fall, winter, and then like our like early spring for the most part. But it definitely, it would not be something that I would wear during like the warmer months, which is, you know, basically from like April through like October for the most part. So yeah, I mean, this is still going to be a solid choice, I would say, if you're looking for like a Silky Woods alternative, and you know, you don't want to spend like $100 to $120 on Silky Woods, then I would say this is definitely a good choice, man. I think this typically goes for like around $35 to $40 or so for this 100 ml. Whereas, like I said, Silky Woods, that's more kind of like, from discounters anyway, you're looking at probably like around $120 or more for the Silky Woods. So Silky Woods is not like a super expensive fragrance right now either. But I do think that even though this is the cheaper fragrance, this to me anyway does smell better. I do still think that this is a very kind of unisex smelling, you know, woody, vanillic type of scent. But yeah, man, to me, the woods in this are a little bit more kind of sweetened up and a little bit more kind of creamier than what they are in the original. And they don't necessarily smell as sort of burnt as what they do and silky woods, at least for me anyway. So that's again why I actually prefer this one. In terms of the performance on Notes Jazz, Notes Jazz actually is about the same, I would say, as Silky Woods is. So Silky Woods is not really like a super beast mode projecting scent. So I would say you're gonna get probably a little bit under arm's length or so for about the first hour, hour and a half. And then, in terms of like the longevity, it's going to be like around that kind of 6 hour mark for the most part, maximum. So a very kind of average performing type of fragrance. I would expect more performance out of like a kind of like a sweet, woody, vanillic type of scent like this, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't really perform that well. All right. But yeah, man, this one is very, very good, man. I would say in terms of my sort of closeness rating on this I would easily say is about 90% Silky Woods. So very, very close to it. Again, if you're looking for that scent profile, but just, something a lot cheaper, then I would say definitely go with the Notes Jazz. And then in terms of my sort of overall rating on this, I would say this is probably like a 7.5 out of 10. All right. So again, man, definitely check out Notes Jazz from Fragrance World. And then the last one on the list, this one is from Lattafa, and this one is the Fakhar, I think, Platin, I believe. So this one, it is a YSL Y Elixir, I think, interpretation. And this one, I don't like this one at all, man. This one, for whatever reason, is just like, it's overly sweet and overly strong. Compared to the original from YSL, like I would much rather wear the YSL. Now, like I mentioned before in the previous video where I had this video in, or where I had this fragrance in the video, this overall, the scent profile doesn't really smell like an elixir to me. But I definitely, I can see that the YSL, it does smell very similar, but the YSL is a lot more, like it's not as sweet. The citruses definitely come across more like sort of diffusive. And I would say more kind of along the lines of like all their other sort of like fresher YSL fragrances. The Lattafa just comes across like overly sweet. I would say like sickeningly sweet. Yeah, like the citruses in the Lattafa, they smell like candied, basically. Candied with like extra corn syrup, extra sugar. Like this is like sugary sweet. Whereas, the YSL, it still has like some freshness to it. Like this smells like it smells like the YSL smells like it should be in that YSL Y line. The Lattafa, I mean, it does still smell like the same sort of scent profile, but it's just like I mentioned, it's like overly sweet. And this was actually, when I mentioned this fragrance in my previous video, I had said that I was wearing this fragrance that day and I had a headache, and I didn't know if the headache came from this or not. It absolutely came from this fragrance. This fragrance absolutely gave me a headache. It was that strong. And I mean, typically I'm not one to like complain about how strong a fragrance is. Like I actually do like stronger fragrances, but the way that this comes across, like it's super cloying, it's headache inducing, it's very kind of synthetic. And I mean, overall, I would say the scent profile in general is a very kind of synthetic scent profile. So don't get me wrong about that. But the Lattafa, everything about it is just like amped up to like 20, and it doesn't need to be. It really doesn't. So, I mean, I would say if you like really, really loud, strong fragrances that are just like absolutely beast mode, they last forever, somebody probably 20 feet away is going to smell you, then I think the Fakhar Platin will be your fragrance. But if you're somebody like me, where it's like, you know, yeah, you like strong fragrances, but you don't necessarily need like everybody, like the whole entire room to smell you, or, you know, people 20 feet away to smell you, then I think this is probably going to be too much. The original YSL DNA, I mean, it's okay. Like, I wouldn't buy a full bottle of the YSL Y Elixir either. But the Lattafa is just not it, man. The Lattafa is not it to me at all. So, yeah, I would say, you know, for this, you are definitely going to get something that smells very similar to YSL Y Elixir. So it does, to me, kind of come across as like, kind of like citrusy and sweet and gingery, sort of like, you know, the same sort of vibe that you get from like the YSL Y line, kind of herbal as well, you could say. But this to me kind of has more of sort of like a, I don't know, it has like a slightly kind of like, almost sort of like a drier sheet sort of fresh, you know, fresh note to it. Like it smells very kind of synthetic. And that's why I was saying, like, to me, I don't really get like elixir vibes from this particular scent profile in general. But everything is down up to about 20, I would say, in the Lattafa. So, you know, if that's something you're looking for, then I would say absolutely go for it. This is going to be probably one of your strongest fragrances in your collection. And it's, you know, not really that expensive. I believe this goes for about $30 or so. So it's going to be pretty cheap with really good performance. But I just can't, this is not a fragrance that I would wear. And I definitely won't be keeping this at all. All right. So in terms of the performance, you know, again, performance on this is super beast mode. So I'm talking about at least probably 2 arms length or so, or an arm and a half's length of, you know, projection for at least like the first 3-4 hours, like literally. And then longevity wise, well over 12 hours. All right. So like I mentioned, this is super beast mode, at least on me. So much to the point where it was too much. It was headache inducing. As for my closeness rating on this, I would say this is going to be probably about 80% YSLY Elixir. You know, again, it just comes across way sweeter than the YSLY Elixir. But overall, you can definitely tell that, you know, the scent DNA is still in this fragrance for sure. And then in terms of my overall rating for this I would say it's like a 4 out of 10. And I mean, I think maybe if this was not so cloying and just like headache inducing, it would probably be more like a 7 or a 7.5. But this is literally a fragrance that I just can't wear without getting a headache, you know, and I've tried it multiple times and I've gotten a headache each time. So I know for sure that this is what's giving me a headache. All right. So again, man, that's my take on Fakhar Platin. And that's my take on all of these fragrances, man. Definitely let me know in the comments what you all thought about these fragrances, if you all have actually smelled these fragrances or if you own them. And, you know, definitely let me know what you all's take are on these fragrances, all right? Also, I'll have links in the description to where you can pick all of these up. And if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see you all in the next video.